Welcome and thank you for joining Elevate and Empower event today. I am Nafi Abdullahi, your technical producer for today's event. If you run into any trouble, please use the chat feature to contact me directly. Please use a thumbs up reaction to let us know that you can hear, please. Let me know if you can hear me. Thumbs up. Awesome. Thank you so much. The Elevate and Empower, a spotlight on leadership and learning series, aims to enhance the skills and knowledge of the Veterans Benefits Administration leaders and aspiring leaders at various grade levels through the monthly training sessions. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping notes. Today's event is being recorded. Please know that your microphone was muted by default when you logged in. However, you are encouraged to type comments and questions into the chat. All questions will be answered throughout the event and at the end of the event. Live captioning is enabled in Teams. You can click the More Actions button, which is the three dots at the top of the screen, then click on Language and Speech, select Turn on Live Captions, select English, and click on Confirm. Finally, your feedback is very important to us. At the conclusion of today's event, a link to a brief survey will appear. We would love to hear what you think about today's event. At this time, I would like to introduce our speaker, Ms. Elizabeth Pravat, Learning Management Officer with Learning and Development Division of Office of Human Capital Services. Ms. Pravat, we are honored that you're here with us today. The floor is yours.
All right, thank you so much, Nafi, and welcome everyone. Thank you for being here today. We have a jam-packed agenda, and I'm excited to learn about you during our time together and also hopefully inspire you to lead without authority, which is our topic today. So I would love for you to tell me in the chat, have you ever desired to shape the direction of your team or influence how your work group gets the work done? Let me know if or how you are being invited in your current role or asked to show up in a way that requires you to lead without formal authority, whether it's through a project lead or just an informal work group that's been established. What inspired you to sign up for today's class and learn more about leading without authority? If you're comfortable putting your thoughts in the chat, again, I would love to hear that so I can get a sense of where everybody is coming from today. If you're not comfortable putting that in the chat, please at least mentally get that to the forefront of your thoughts so that you can have that concept in mind as we go throughout today's concept. And so I would love for you to have a sort of real world concrete example of how to apply today's information in your everyday work. So I see that Lena is currently being a team mentor. That's fantastic example of leading without formal authority. Let's see, we've got Drew, who is an assistant coach. So you do have a formal role, but it sounds like you might be new to that, or you're still in the stages of building a rapport with your team. And we've got Evie, who is leading some special projects. That's wonderful. And Irene is working in quality review and training. Absolutely. That is a crucial role for getting the team rallied behind the mission and making sure that they are set up for success. And let's see, Steven says, leading without authority was an interesting title, and I've had several positions over time guiding team members that didn't report to you. That's another great example. We've got Alberts talking about informal coaching to other team members. And Erin is the RO's training manager. And so she holds the responsibility for ensuring all employees complete required training, but you do not have a formal authority over them. Yes. So let's see. And we've got Hannah has been at the VBA longer than many team members. Than many on your team. So you've always shared your institutional knowledge as needed, and you've acted as a mentor. And then Renee is a coach of special projects. So fantastic. We've got a variety of experiences and perspectives today. And really, when we talk about leading without authority in today's class, we're talking about, working through others to get work accomplished and really sort of making sure the people we work with and are aligned with have a similar idea of where we're headed, and getting work accomplished through others can be a real challenge. But with the concepts we'll talk about today, particularly one of the ideas that we're going to closely align our conversation with today is the idea of a high performing team, and how the desire that many of us do hold to be part of a high performing team can help us rally behind these rally behind our mission and get in alignment to achieve greater efficiency, improved accuracy, and increased satisfaction for ourselves as an employee, as well as the team morale with it that we work within. And really understanding your ability to lead without formal authority can help you achieve this idea and this idea of working within a high performing team. So I'll use an example during my time as a training analyst with compensation service. I was, a frontline employee, an individual contributor who was doing the work, and I was asked to lead a project to update some content, some curriculum. And I did not have formal authority over my peers with whom I was working through to get this work done. So I faced some challenges, and I really had to learn what tools were at my disposal to get this work accomplished through my peers without uh, being their formal supervisor. So that's one of the experiences that I've been faced with, and I'll share some more examples of that situation as we go throughout today's course. But I am glad that so many of you shared this information in the chat about what this looks like for you in your current environment. And again, keep that in mind as we go throughout the lesson, so you have a concrete example of how this looks in your day-to-day work. Let's go ahead and touch on our objectives so you have an idea of what we're going to cover today and what you can expect to get out of this lesson. So by the end of today's course, I would love for you to understand the connection between a high-performing team and informal leadership. Next, you'll be able to identify the sources of power for those without a formal leadership role. We are going to define the idea of co-elevation, which comes from this book that you see on the screen here called Leading Without Authority by Keith Ferrazzi. And many of the concepts that we're going to touch on today come from this book, as well as a few more resources that I will point you towards at the end of the slides today. So co-elevation is one of those concepts from the book, and we'll talk about that. And then we'll be able to apply co-elevation concepts to workplace scenarios within VBA. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and jump into our first objective, which is learning about the various types of authority. So before we get into these details, as Nafi mentioned at the start of the course, please go ahead if you have questions or comments, go ahead and put those in the chat throughout the lesson. I will keep my eye on the chat box as we go and try to answer those questions as we progress. But again, I welcome the interaction. You'll get much more out of the class today if you are engaged and responsive to any questions or insights that you might have throughout the course. So please lean into the chat. All right, so on the left-hand side of the screen, you're seeing some sources of power that really are only available to those who do have that formal leadership position. So given that we're talking about informal leadership, these sources of power aren't really applicable, but I think it's helpful to be aware of what these other sources of power are as you jump into your leadership journey. So first up, legitimate power. So with this, the leader occupies a position that gives them that formal authority, whether it's because of the the organizational chart or some other type of hierarchy that exists. And that legitimate power causes others to follow their requirements, directions, and opinions. We also have something called reward power, and this is where the leader's power comes from their ability to reward their followers with maybe monetary or non-monetary incentives such as pay increases, promotions, public congratulations, and involvement in important decisions. So, in the environment we work in today, we can't give awards unless we are, in that supervisory role. So that would be a formal source of power. And then lastly, a coercive source of power. And this is when a leader's power comes from the ability to punish followers with actions such as demotion or discipline, or exclusion from certain types of meetings. So not necessarily what we would think about as like a positive source of power, but that does exist, and it's good to be aware of. But again, in our environment, that type of power is usually going to come from a formal uh, role. And so on the right-hand side of the screen, what you're seeing is sources of power that could apply to somebody in a formal leadership role, but for our purposes today, we can lean into these sources of power when we don't hold those former leadership positions. So pay attention, because these will be the sources of power that you could lean into in your budding informal leadership power that you are exploring. So first up, we have what's called a referent power. And this type of power emerges when followers of an individual identify with and like their leader, and the leader is able to influence their followers through example and also encouragement or discouragement. So really it's just like, hey, I like this person. I like what they have to say. I like their style. They're inspirational to me. So I'm going to follow their lead, essentially what this type of power is about. And next, we have what's called expert power. So this is the type of power that I would say I had to lean into when it came to that project I mentioned I was overseeing, related to updating training content. So I had kind of more senior amount of time on this team, so I knew the ropes of how things worked when it came to updating this content. And so that's why I was asked to take on this informal leadership role. And so with expert power, the leader has a superior or more senior level of knowledge, experience, or expertise on the topic. And that allows the followers to rely on this individual for their own behaviors. And lastly, we have information power. So the thing about information power is that usually this is a temporary source of power. It comes into play when the leader possesses knowledge that others want or need, and it allows that individual to influence their followers. But because this information does need to get passed on to those that they are leading, once that information is disseminated, that source of power kind of dissipates. But there are some roles where people are regularly getting new information. And so because of that setup, they might have a continual source of power because they are, the ongoing recipients of new information. So as I mentioned, today our focus is going to be on the areas from which we can draw informal authority. And why might these sources of informal authority be of interest to you? Well, that goes back to the idea of high performance teams. And we are all a part of a team. And why not, if we're going to be a part of the team, why not work to drive ourselves and our teammates to really become high performing, to reach our goals, to work together like a well-oiled machine, to communicate, to get organized, to stay on top of all of our project deadlines, things like that, so we can get those high achievements and we can be recognized as the high performing team that we may desire to be. So with these sources of power, these are the things that you'll want to tap into in order to achieve that result. And that's what we'll talk about today, as well as some additional approaches for that leading without authority. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about high performing teams so you can understand what this concept is and some of the traits of these high performing teams and how they get there. So a high performance team is a group of individuals who work together to solve problems, accomplish goals with consistently positive results. Typically, these teams are made up of individuals with unique abilities and expertise that complement one another. And so together they bring their different skills to the table to get all of the work accomplished. These teams often have a strong sense of community and collaboration, and this collaborative environment really helps members feel comfortable sharing their thoughts and opinions. And when it comes to a well-oiled team that functions in such a high performance fashion, that ability to have an honest and open relationship with one another is really, it kind of feeds back into that team environment and helps everybody um, feel valued, feel heard throughout any teamwork that they do. So, for example, what might a high performance team look like in VBA? This might be a group of claims processors who can call upon one another to locate reference material, share guidance on specific case scenarios, and really count on each other to help them along when it comes to getting the work done on a daily basis. Alternately, in the central office environment, it could look like a group of analysts who implement projects together and they keep one another accountable to their deadlines and to just doing what they say that they're going to do for one another. So let's talk about now some of these traits that are often shown within high performance teams. And that includes communication. High performing teams, they know the best ways to communicate with their peers. And this is because they get to know one another. They have an understanding of, who is a morning person versus who, likes to hold off on any meetings or really detailed conversations until, they've had their coffee for that day, for example. So they know preferences and they know when their message will be best received. Goal setting. These teams, they set priorities and align responsibilities with every member of the team based upon their area of expertise. And when we are working on things and tasks and projects that we feel we are highly skilled at, we are going to be more apt to do well and to get things done quickly, and versus working in an area that's out of alignment with your interests, with your strong suits and your skills. So that's something to think about. Create when it comes to goal sharing, they also create a shared vision for the final goal for that team on a specific project or a specific metric that they're trying to meet. And really creating this shared vision is motivational, and it serves as a source of motivation for the group members, and that helps them excel in the things that they're carrying out on a daily basis. Next up, trust. They encourage discussion of different topics and points of view. And in doing so, they foster an environment where each member feels confident and comfortable sharing their perspectives, which is vital for the team to perform at its highest potential. If we let conversations go, not fully thought through or not hearing every perspective, there might be resentment that kind of brews within this team, and that can fester into a less positive outcome, which leads into the next element of constructive criticism. And I know we could have an entire separate course on delivering feedback or speaking open and honestly with one another. And truly, this is a very difficult thing for many of us to deliver constructive feedback or deliver any type of feedback that we feel is going to be difficult for the recipient to hear. But when it comes to a high performing team, they recognize that this type of feedback is important and it's welcome as a part of their teamwork process. We are not going to grow in our own abilities unless we can see how others perceive us or how our work is perceived by others. And getting that constructive feedback is a crucial element of that. And, you know, on the flip side, not only do we have to be able to deliver that constructive criticism, we need to be able to receive it as well. So um, if that's something you struggle with, you are not alone. So many of us do have difficulty in this area, but it's an opportunity to grow. So think through that and think how you show up in that arena and any potential growth opportunities when it comes to delivering or receiving feedback. And then lastly, organization. When we have a high-performing team, we are organized. We know where we can find information. We know who's responsible for what. There's no ambiguity in or gray area when it comes to specifics. Everybody's on the same page. So members can manage their workload as well as holding one another accountable in doing that. And I mentioned this previously, but if we look at the right hand side of this slide, we see some benefits of a high performing team, which include boosted efficiency, improved accuracy, greater success, and overall improved employee satisfaction. So I love when I am part of teams that can achieve these items. It takes work, it takes effort, but I know that those of you who are here today want to lean into your informal leadership authority. And this is one way that you can do that and work towards attaining that high achieving, high performing team. All right, I'm seeing some comments in the chat about communication being key and that trust is so important for team dynamics. Absolutely. And then Hannah mentions that she always walks individuals through when an error was on an action and how to fix it so that they have notes to refer to and that they can hopefully avoid it in the future. That's a fantastic approach. You're showing that you are available and willing to share your knowledge, your expert information, and they feel the individual on the receiving end likely feels that they are in a learning environment, and that is crucial for building that trust so we can feel safe when we are growing, we're learning, we're making mistakes, but we're not necessarily getting punished or criticized for that. We are in a learning environment and they have that support from you. So that's fantastic. All right, so moving on to our next slide. If any of the things that I talked about on the previous slide related to high performance team really resonated with you and you feel like you have wished for and hoped for a team that works together so well, and the thought ever crossed your mind about, gosh, when is our boss going to get the team organized, or when is the boss going to really clearly define um, our work methods or the organizational system that we use to keep our documents together and organized? Well, I have a little bit of tough love for you. And the thing that you might have been waiting on is not necessarily your boss or your supervisor. It might be you. The concept, one of the concepts from Keith Ferrazzi's book is that we need to accept that it's all on you. Now, this is not to say that all of the work is on you, but rather the effort that's required to build these relationships, to get things organized, to vocalize your needs within your work and your work environment to be successful. It starts with you. So rather than sitting on the sidelines and wishing and hoping that, someone who has this formal authority will come along and get everybody organized, get everybody motivated, you actually have the power to do that yourself. And I know that that's a mindset shift in a lot of ways because we are very much in a hierarchical organization where chain of command is respected. And I'm not saying it's not, but I am saying that there are things that you have the ability to do today on your informal authority level to make some of these changes yourself. And I feel like that can be empowering once we have that realization. So let's talk about some of the things that this might involve. What are some of these steps that you've accepted that it's on you? Well, what do I do next? Okay, so let's jump into this list on the right-hand side. So what you can do is start reaching out, start building channels of communication with the individuals that you work with on a regular basis to actually have a dialogue and a conversation versus maybe relying on that information to flow through the chain of command. Um, and let me just correct myself here. I'm not saying to go out of your chain of command because I don't want that to be misinterpreted. But if you have, peers at your level, your teammates, things like that, Make sure you have an IM conversation with you and your peers, your teammates, so that maybe you do need to have some things, but you don't want to necessarily bother the boss in the large group or division chat, but you just want to touch base with your peers. Set up that chat. That's a peer-to-peer communication. And that can be a huge effort to make people feel like they have that method for reaching out and you have a way to connect. Okay, so again, don't disregard the chain of command. I'm not saying that, but just make those peer-to-peer connections where you have that safety to do so. And if you're confused or concerned, please check with your supervisor if a connection would be appropriate for you to make. That's always a fail-safe right there. But once you have those channels of communication, start building trust. And that might involve getting to know somebody um, outside of the work, the daily sort of kind of automatic communications we might have. So how are you today? Oh, I'm fine. Okay, great. Let's jump into the work. I'm saying like, sometimes we have to give a little bit of ourselves and then others are willing to give a little bit more as well. I noticed that, you know, in our team meetings when the conversation starts going with like, hey, how was everybody's weekend? And everyone says good, it was fine. Say a little bit more. Say, oh, well, I did X, Y, and Z. And that helps people know like, oh, well, Elizabeth, she likes to go hiking on the weekends. That's cool. I like to hike too. Maybe I'll ask her how she got into that. And then you have this commonality that you can reach out to one another on. So just open up a little bit more about yourself to help others lean in and do the same. So then once you have that rapport and that trust built, that can really help drive collaborative efforts. People are more willing to lean into a group or an effort if they feel like they're more personally connected and invested with their peers. And so your efforts to get to know one another, share a little bit about yourself, can go a long way in helping others feel comfortable in that team environment. Next up, again, this concept of feedback, which as I mentioned can be difficult, but if we, let others know that we are open to feedback and we want to grow, that sets up a dialogue that can help others do the same. And they can offer you the feedback and then maybe contrarily, they'll be open to you giving them feedback. And this sort of um, reciprocal relationship can help both of you grow and feel like you are in a safe space to give and um, receive feedback. One of the things that I mentioned when I related to the project I mentioned earlier when I was with compensation service, we really leaned into this idea of giving one another feedback. And one of the kind of rules of engagement that we set up when it came to this idea was we we made sure before we offered the feedback that the individual was available and open to that feedback in that moment. So for example, if we talked about this situation where let's say you already had a rough day and somebody comes in and they come to you and they just start, popping off about, hey, you did this, but I really thought we should have done it like that. You might not be in the right headspace in that moment to accept that feedback in a constructive way. So we set up this kind of rule of engagement where, hey, before you offer um, feedback to a peer, let's ask the question, is now a good time for feedback? Or can I give you feedback now? And that gives that individual the opportunity to say, I'm not in a good headspace today. Can we touch base tomorrow? And so that way, we're being more respectful of each individual's mindset in that time and making sure that the information and the message we have to deliver is going to be received in the manner that we want it to be delivered in the effort of growth and continuing to push one another in this high performance mindset. So, and again, that just took a kind of a meta conversation about how we wanted to implement this idea of delivering feedback in the name of growth. And we sat down and we said, well, what does this look like if we start offering feedback to one another on a recurring basis? And that was one of the rules that we came up with. So it might be a matter of asking the individuals that you work with, how do we want to implement this? What does this look like for us? And that way everybody has a similar idea of what it looks like for you and your team. Yeah, great point in the chat here about making sure that they're not caffeine deprived or hangry. I think that's absolutely a good point. And then I did hear, or rather see earlier, Raphael had mentioned something about psychological safety, and that's absolutely what we're talking about here. So really great point to bring up here. And I'm glad you have that awareness of that concept, but really that's what in the example I shared, that's what we were doing, is we were creating that psychologically safe environment to share that feedback. So thank you for bringing into that concept, and definitely something that if you are wanting to grow in that feedback arena, would encourage you to also research that idea of psychological safety into your environment. Okay, and then lastly, as I mentioned previously, if we are doing these things actively with our team members on number 5, we want to also make sure that we are staying open to receiving all of the above items from our teammates in return. So, it's got to be a two-way street when we're talking about a high-performing team and we're talking about getting work done through others. We have to give these items and we have to receive them from our friends, or our teammates rather, who might become friends if you do lean into the idea of a high-performing team and getting to know one another. So that could be another bonus. And then we've got a quote on the screen here. Real leadership is not telling others what to do. It's about inviting others, encouraging others, and getting others excited about new possibilities. And I think I saw a comment in the chat from Savella about informal leadership is not a forced approach. And I agree with that. That is what this quote is exemplifying here too. So great job calling that out and really seeing that. Really, it's not about telling each other. Even when we're in a formal leadership role, we we could rely solely on our positional authority to make people do what we want them to do. But in reality, like, think about a boss that relied solely on that authority. That was probably not the greatest supervisory experience you could have had there. So a real leader, with or without formal authority, isn't going to be the one, telling you and demanding you to do certain things. They're going to work to accomplish these things. They're going to get to know you. They're going to build trust. You're going to have a rapport. They're going to inspire the team. And so those are all things you can do without authority as well. So really just another great invitation and sort of hopefully a bit of inspiration to help you recognize what you really do have at your fingertips if you can help drive this growth towards that high performance arena. All right, so next up, we're going to talk about one of the other main concepts within Keith Ferrazzi's book, which is co-elevation. So this is one of the driving principles of Keith Ferrazzi's leading without authority mindset. And its guiding ethos is going higher together. When we are co-elevating each other, we are nurturing a generosity of spirit, a sense of commitment to our teammates, and our shared mission. The outcome of this is almost always exceeds what we could have accomplished through the regular channels of our organizational chart. And so this idea of going higher together, I think, goes hand in hand with the idea of building and working towards a high performance team. So the co-elevation I like to kind of think about that as a visual, like if we are co-elevating, we are rising up together, we are kind of hand in hand, not physically, but metaphorically hand in hand, rising together with the work that we are doing. We're bringing everybody with us. And in reality, that's what we have to have if we are going to have success in all the areas that we desire to have success. And not only success, but growth and connection and really collective achievement and accountability, which is, I can't speak for everybody, but I know how fulfilling that can be. And I know from many of my peers how fulfilling that can be to work in an environment that allows us to experience that kind of success. It's so fulfilling, and it makes the workday, not 100% of the time, but many times it makes the workday a little smoother, a little more enjoyable because we're feeling challenged, we're feeling appreciated by our peers, we're feeling connected to one another, and really that's how we go higher together. So just a little bit of inspiration, and again, I just can't get enough of that visual of you just co-elevating together, rising up hand in hand and lifting each other towards that success. Just such a powerful visual. So I hope you can take that with you today. So at this point, I want to um, transition into some examples. And some of these examples might be familiar based upon the work that you do, but others, if they're less familiar, I would invite you to still think through mentally the scenario about what does this informal leadership look like and what can you learn from it based upon the example. So first up, we are going to talk about an example that uses referent power. So if we think about back to when we talked about this definition, referent power is the kind of power that emerges when the followers identify with and like their leader. Okay, so because of that, they gain influence over others, and they offer encouragement or disencouragement, which helps influence how their followers behave. So let's look at the scenario. Um, and I just have to pause here momentarily. I'm seeing some comments in the chat about bringing treats and a candy dish, and that could absolutely have an influence on your referent power. um, People will come by to chat with you, and that treat, that candy creates a positive association. And although it's such a small little act, that still drives connection. People come to your desk for the candy dish and it sparks a conversation which leads to talking together to solve a work problem. And really, as basic as that sounds, that can really drive referent power and help build that team connection. So I really love hearing that. And that's, hey, that's one of the pluses of the return to office environment that we're working in. Candy dish, Rice Krispie treats, that's fantastic. So you know that's one great way to capitalize on this return to office. This is what we can bring back into it. So great share there from those of you who talked about bringing in treats and having those candy dishes. That's a source of power. Okay, so in this example, we've got Sarah, and Sarah is a central office project team member, and she's known for her positive attitude, reliability, and ability to mediate conflicts. Her colleagues trust and admire her because she's always willing to lend a helping hand and listens to others' concerns. So that's the background. Now going on to the action of the situation. So during a critical phase of a project, the team faces a significant challenge and the morale is low. Sarah steps in to motivate her colleagues by organizing a team building activity and also providing emotional support through encouragement and constructive feedback. So the outcome here is that the team feels more cohesive and more motivated. They work collaboratively to overcome the challenge, and the project moves forward successfully. Sarah's referent power has positively influenced the group's dynamic and performance without holding a formal leadership position. So, that's best case scenario. Of course, life doesn't always work in that way, but that is an example of referent power in action. So I want to ask you all, Can you envision something like this scenario we just read through playing out within your team? When you face a challenge, who steps up? Anybody? Have you ever faced a challenge and you wished somebody would step up, but they didn't? And could you see yourself fulfilling that role of a future challenge? If your team is facing a roadblock, do you have the courage? Do you have the skills to lean in and help your team through that? What do you think? Terrell says that talking things through with your team, that's absolutely a step in the right direction. And if one individual isn't stepping up, this is your invitation to maybe be that individual. Have you done sort of the pre-work, the prerequisites of building the trust, building the rapport with the team to kind of serve as that mediator? Or is this your opportunity to do that? Okay. So what else do you think? What do some others think about that? Okay, so we've got an example from Lena, an example of communication with a seemingly defeated colleague. Okay, great. Let's see. I see that you're offering a lot of encouragement in that message, and that goes such a long way when somebody is feeling down to know that someone is there supporting them and kind of witnessing the struggle they're having. So way to go on that. That's absolutely going to build trust. And let's see, Renee is saying motivation and lending a helping hand, finding the answer and solving the problems together. That's a great approach to using that referent power within your team and helping each other through that problem. So hopefully this helps you see what referent power might look like in an informal leadership role. And if you've ever thought or hoped for somebody to come in and serve in the role that we saw Sarah in this example, maybe that person is you. Maybe that can be you who helps one another get through a problem. All right, we've got some more thoughts coming into the chat. So Savella is saying that when she sees a strength in a team member and feels that they may need a push, she pushes a little. And in doing so, you need to show someone that you see their strengths and helps them move forward as well. I think that's great. And sometimes we do need that little encouragement. We need to feel like we're seen. We need to feel like, hey, somebody recognizes what I thought was there within myself, and I'm gonna show others what I know I can do. So I love that. I love that supportive approach. All right, let's see. So Hannah is a problem solver. She tends to step up and volunteer a lot and always encourages others to do the same when opportunities arise. That's fantastic. And being kind of that cheerleader is such a positive influence across a team. Okay, mentions of cross training, that's helpful too. So we know what one another is doing and we know how to relate to each other. And then emotional support when errors are made. That's fantastic. Okay, let's move on to another example. And in this example, we're going to be talking about expert power. All right, so scenario. We've got John, a claims processor who possesses a deep understanding of a very technical regulation. He doesn't hold a managerial title, but is highly respected for his technical expertise and ability to explain the process of applying the regulation to individual claims. Going on to action. John offers to conduct training sessions and provides detailed documentation to help his colleagues understand the intricate aspects of the regulation and its application. John regularly advises the team and reviews their work to ensure quality. The outcome of all of this is that the team gains confidence and competence in applying the regulation, leading the team to successful completion of the claims impacted by this particular regulation in which he's an expert. His expert power allows him to lead and guide the team effectively, contributing to the group's success. So I'm hearing based on some of the comments in the chat that many of you who are informally leading use this expert power as your source. You are quality reviewers. You're relied upon because you have a long time with VBA and you have a great deal of institutional knowledge. Well, that's fantastic. You know, that can serve as your source of power and influence over others. So allow that to, open you up and connect with others. So I'm going to kind of throw a little bit of a wrench in this scenario. But what if instead of being so open and helpful about this knowledge, what if John instead was a gatekeeper of this knowledge and information? And instead of offering it openly and freely, he was kind of a little more closed off, didn't like to be bothered during the day. How do you think that would impact the team dynamic? Distrust, absolutely. We've got this expert on our team and they're not willing to help us. That doesn't feel good. Yes, negatively, absolutely. We would feel like there was no team. We would not feel like we were supported, or at a minimum, we wouldn't feel like John was a part of our team. We wouldn't feel like he was there for us. Um, and it would hold the team back. Absolutely. We wouldn't have the growth environment. So, um, one thing So I definitely know that there are people in the workplace who don't want to be bothered, who aren't always willing to help. And, sometimes that's the reality that we're dealing with. But I think we shouldn't discount, if John were a gatekeeper, we shouldn't just discount him altogether and exclude him from any potential growth opportunities that we want to drive within the team. I think we could still, include John if he was a gatekeeper, if we wanted to try to build a better rapport within the team. We might have to be a little bit more direct, learn a little bit more about John's communication style to really get a good connection so that he could open up a little bit. Um, but we don't want to just further wall him off just because he might be a little bit difficult. So vote him off the island. Theoretically, we might wish that somebody who was closed off like this wasn't the way they were, but sometimes we just have to meet people where they are. And if we have a gatekeeper on our team, I would encourage you to still go through these motions of trying to build this high performing team and try to build a rapport. It might take more time. It might take a few different approaches, a few different people trying to break down that barrier, but keep trying. Keep building that team, and with time, you might see some progress. So um, don't give up or don't be discouraged if you ever encounter a gatekeeper. So I just want to offer that if that, because I know sometimes when we are new to informal leadership, we might be hesitant if we hit a roadblock. But, I don't want that to cause you to discontinue your efforts altogether. Okay, and then last example here is related to um, information power. So again, that information power we talked about previously is often temporary, but it's still a source of power, and um, we need to just see an example of what this looks like. So let's go through this one with Alice. So Alice is an administrative assistant. She has access to crucial scheduling and resource allocation information within a business line. She keeps detailed records and is known for her organizational skills. The division is preparing for a major presentation, and there is a risk of scheduling conflicts that could affect availability of key team members. Alice anticipates these issues and proactively shares critical information about team members' schedules. She ensures everyone is well informed. So the outcome of this is that the team is able to make necessary arrangements and adjustments, ensuring that all key personnel are available and prepared for the presentation. Alice's information power facilitates effective planning and coordination, contributing to the successful delivery of the presentation. So this is great. Alice has that information power because she's sort of like the hub of where all of the schedules come together, and she can kind of see and anticipate those conflicts. And so that is our illustration of information power. And in this case, Alice was proactive. She knew that she had the information, and she knew that how important this project was. So she went ahead and resolved any conflicts proactively. On the other hand, again, kind of flipping this scenario like we did the previous one, imagine if instead of being proactive, Alice waited for someone to ask her about this. You know, she didn't recognize her source of power. She didn't recognize the influence that she could have on the success or potential failure of this outcome and deliverable, but instead she just kind of waited for somebody else to recognize the problem. Now, maybe, you know, she's not uh, doesn't have all of the information about the specifics of the project. So, or maybe she's new to the position, so she doesn't have that necessarily forward thinking approach about kind of anticipating things that might come up. So that's just, it could be, you know, her newness and things like that. But, you know, once she is experienced in the role and recognizes how this power can be so influential of her team, you know, somebody in Alice's role can really have such a big impact on the team. And if she were to withhold that information, it could have a detrimental impact on the team. So, whoops, sorry about that. I scrolled too fast. So let me see what we have in the chat here. Okay. Raphael's mentioning it's important to share knowledge to build coverage in the event of absence of SMEs. I absolutely agree with that. And again, that's something we all have the power to anticipate and look towards. And if we have these lines of communication set up, like we talked about, like creating those informal chats with our peers, we have a way to communicate that and just making sure we're all on the same page. And I think the other thing about when we talk about holding one another accountable when it comes to these informal connections, um, people can get a little bit defensive about, well, that's my job. Why are you asking me about that? Of course, I'm on top of it. If we have this rapport built up with each other, we can set those expectations within one another. Like, hey, I'm not micromanaging you. I'm your peer, but you know, this is just our way to make sure everybody's in alignment on the same outcome, the same deadlines, things like that, so that we don't have those kind of moments of defensiveness that could crop up when we may sense that somebody is um, sort of informally supervising us, so to speak. So, but it's really, again, just an effort to get our team to this high performance level. So we are all looking out for each other. And again, that's what Alice is doing in this example. So I want to transition now into some next steps for you and an opportunity for you to ask questions should you have any. But on the screen here, we've got a personal action plan, some specific steps that you can take right after this training. And I don't think I mentioned at the beginning, but I will send these slides out to everybody for your reference. And so that will include this one with these 4 steps. But I really think if you can take this information, the sooner you can apply it, the more committed you'll get to leaning into this informal leading without formal authority. And so start off by defining some specific things you can do immediately within your VBA team. Identify when you're going to take action so that you can hold yourself accountable. Determine who you might want to collaborate with. Maybe you've got a peer that's on the call today. You can get together after this and talk about what this might look like in your team. And then discuss your plan with some others that are on your team about how this could positively benefit you, your work, the way everybody feels about team morale, um, getting the work done successfully, all of those things. Talk about some of those benefits. Talk about some of the things you're struggling with. Opening up, again, opening up on your end can help others feel safe to open up as well. And so these types of discussions are key to getting that rapport built, the trust created to set the foundation for the success and a high performing team. All right. So again, if you have any questions, please put those in the chat. Or if you see any roadblocks that could be potentially impacting you from taking action right now, what are those? Get those out in at your forefront to talk through with your peers. If you want to bounce some ideas off of me, feel free to reach out via IM. I'd love to chat. I'm seeing some comments here about the production environment, which the regional offices, that is such a real, that's your reality every day. You're working towards getting those productivity goals met. And it can be challenging. Absolutely, Raphael. And so he's shared a great approach here of proactively surface scheduling risks and resource constraints before they come roadblocks. I mean, that's great. Get those out in the open. Talk to your team members about what's coming up for them. Um, so really great perspective there, Raphael. And I hope some of the things we talked about today you can take back with you and inspire your peers. I'm also seeing some comments about a balanced workplace. If you have a balanced workplace, you can empower others to use key information, which could be helpful in future projects. And that sharing that information, not being gatekeepers with information, again, um, like Evie says, it builds trust and it really just helps drive towards success. If you have people on your team who feel uninformed or feel like they're quote unquote out of the loop because others aren't keeping them informed, that can be one of those detrimental things that erodes the trust and it erodes our efforts to build that high performance team. So getting out there, being transparent is huge. Okay, well, let's go ahead. Like I mentioned, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I would love to chat more in depth about your specific team, if you have anything to share. But let's summarize what we covered today, because we did cover a lot. We talked about understanding the connection between a high-performing team and informal leadership. We talked about the sources of power for both informal and formal leadership roles. We talked about co-elevation and how that relates to high performing team. Again, that visual for lifting one another up. And then we looked at some scenarios. So I appreciate everyone's time today. Here's our references and resources. And there was a question about TMS credit. And yes, we will, for those who attended the live session, we will get that TMS credit closed out on your end. So I appreciate the attendance and time today. And with that, I will pass it back to Nafi to close things out for us.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Let's show Elizabeth some love in the chat and some, oh, thank you. Yes, clapping it up for her. She did an amazing job. Appreciate this topic. As I just mentioned in the chat, I just dropped the survey link. Elizabeth would love to hear from you all about how she delivered today's training. I mean, I was blown away. Please share your praises with her. Also, feel free to share any questions you might have in that survey and or drop it here in the chat for us. This concludes today's event. We hope to see you at the other events that we have coming up. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.